All right. A couple of things before we jump into the presentations. I want to share with you all Mile High Connect's inspiration to action. Why do we as a collaborative exist? And so we envision a racially equitable and resilient Denver metro region where community-driven solutions are at the center of transformative systems change. So what does that actually mean? It means that when communities of color and communities that are really impacted by disasters such as COVID-19, that we are able to really look at what systems are creating the inequities that we work within. And our mission has been to prioritize and increase equitable investment in community-driven solutions by advancing our collective action among nonprofits, community organizers, public and private individuals, so that we can all participate and all make sure that we are contributing to the growth of our region. We know, especially COVID-19, has really exposed deeply rooted systemic inequities among entrepreneurs of color. And so that's really why we want to have this conversation today with some folks from Los Angeles, from San Antonio, and from folks here locally about what are we doing to support culturally relevant businesses, especially in this moment of time. Each of your organizations, whether you are in the philanthropic community or you're working directly with entrepreneurs, plays a critical role in ensuring that our culturally relevant businesses not only have their needs met, but are able to be with us post-COVID-19. That is critical and top of mind for us. And so what we really want to do is continue that conversation by highlighting what's happening across the country. So who are we featuring? We're going to start with Storm Taliaferro with NALCAB, which is the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. NALCAB is a national organization, and I will certainly let Storm talk a little bit more about who they are and what they do. But Storm is the senior program manager at NALCAB, where she manages the small business development grant, loan, training, and technical assistance programs. We're also going to feature Maribel Garcia. She is the Senior Associate of Economic Development at Inclusive Action, where she manages the Semilla Fund and supports entrepreneurs through COVID-19. Inclusive Action has been doing tremendous work recently, but really since their inception, to support and build strong local economies that uplift local low-income urban communities through advocacy and transformative economic development. And then finally, we're going to feature Makisha Booth. She is the founder and head business coach at SistaBiz Global Network, a business accelerator program for Black women entrepreneurs. SistaBiz has been doing an amazing job responding to the immediate needs of entrepreneurs in COVID-19, and so we want to feature the work that they've been doing to support our entrepreneurs here locally in Denver. A couple of other items that I just want to share with you all. Please, I encourage you to engage with these organizations virtually. All of us have a Twitter handle, so please feel free to share what you're learning or what you've taken away from this conversation. And then, of course, engage in the chat box with one another as different things highlight questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas that you have for us here locally. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Storm, who will talk a little bit about how NALCAB and the NALCAB members have been experiencing COVID-19 when they think about preserving and supporting culturally relevant businesses. So welcome, Storm.
Thank you so much, Dea. I'm really honored to be here and happy to see so many different faces from across the country working together to lift up our communities. First, I'll talk a little bit about NALCAB. Let's see, so if you can go to the next slide. Right, NALCAB's mission is to strengthen the economy by advancing economic mobility in Latino families. We strengthen and coordinate the capacity of the NALCAB network to deploy capital into low and moderate income communities. Let's see, next slide, please. NALCAB is a network of over 100 anchor institutions in our nation's geographically and ethnically diverse Latino communities in over 40 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. NALCAB network members invest in their communities by building affordable housing, addressing gentrification, supporting small business growth, and providing financial counseling on issues such as credit building and home ownership. A majority of the people served by the NALCAB network are immigrants or the children of immigrants. As a grant maker and a U.S. Treasury certified CDFI, NALCAB strengthens and coordinates the capacity of our network to deploy capital through capacity building, training, technical assistance, impact investing, and not least of all, policy advocacy and research. So according to a Stanford University study, Latino small business owners are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the US, contributing about $500 billion to the US economy. A report from the Joint Economic Committee of Congress concluded that Latinos living in the United States account for $2.3 trillion in economic activity. Census numbers predict that Latinos will make up 28% of the population by 2060. We know that many Latino-owned businesses are sole proprietor entrepreneurs. And looking at this crisis and looking at the number of Latino-owned businesses we have in the United States, we're, as Latino businesses goes, the economy goes. If Latino-owned businesses fail, the U.S. economy fails. So NALCAB's recent policy advocacy efforts are, we provided recommendations for the third stimulus package to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Speaker Pelosi's office, and key congressional committees. We've provided recommendations to the Senate and House Small Business Committees regarding the PPP program and entrepreneurial assistance provisions of the CARES Act. NALCAB itself, in the coming days and weeks, we're mobilizing millions of dollars in emergency financial relief from our funders through our network to invest into Latino communities. And we are members of a coalition to urge the SBA and Treasury for an administrative set-aside in the PPP, especially for CDFIs, which serve our communities. We are currently working feverishly, although everyone says that these days, working feverishly. We need another term for that. But we're working on recommendations to Congress for CARES Act 2.0. So to back up a little bit, March 18th, we issued recommendations to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, advocating for immediate direct payments to low and middle income households, to extend unemployment insurance for those whose unemployment benefits were about to end, to support small business resilience and recovery through assistance from CDFIs by directing that capital to certified CDFIs, and urging that they support vital industries in a financially prudent manner. So really, we were advocating that that industries that are particularly hard hit, services, food, be prioritized. And if there were to be a bailout, that these industries, that the U.S. would be able to take an investment in companies where there is a bailout, and to have strings attached to that regarding executive compensation to make sure that U.S. dollars are well spent. Next slide, please. So what are we seeing? As I talk to members in our network who are lenders, some are CDFIs, some are not, some exclusively do small business development, but for lenders, just in the first weeks of this crisis, I spoke to a lender who typically receives maybe 6 deferral requests and loan modification requests in a month. They received 30 in just one day. Another lender said that they expect to see substantial losses in their portfolio. So it's our CDFIs, our small business development organizations, are are the first to feel and to really try to help out these small businesses by extending the terms of the loan, by doing temporary loan and interest payment forgiveness. Let's see, so we, things are looking hard. Here we have a shot of the San Antonio Food Bank. This made national news. This was on Thursday, April 7th. Cars were lined up for miles, but it was really quite orderly. They mobilized over 1 million pounds of food, 25 tractor trailers. They fed 10,000 households. And pre-registration was required for this. Some people camped out. The parking lot was full at 6 a.m. and cars were lined up for miles. But what was nice to see was that it was orderly, well-planned, and it's an intentional distribution of aid to those most at risk. And that's really what we'd like to see from the SBA and Treasury. So only 27% of childcare workers and food service workers have access to paid sick leave. 64% of retail workers, 58% of construction workers have paid sick leave, and 73% of the private sector overall have paid sick leave. But the food service workers, the retail workers, those are folks who were on the front line, are on the front line, and are more at risk. So so we're advocating for expanded access to paid sick leave. We've also asked Congress to keep an eye on predatory market activity. We want Congress to direct the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to monitor and enforce fraud prevention, wage theft, price gouging, and usury. We'd also like them to monitor the behavior of banks and philanthropies. Banks receive favored access to capital through the Federal Reserve Bank, and philanthropies benefit from nonprofit status tax exemption. So during this economic downturn, we really want to keep an eye on how they are mobilizing to help those most in need. We'd also like them to keep an eye on how this economic downturn is exacerbating the pre-existing housing affordability crisis. A little bit on the EIDL loans. You'll see that I've placed links throughout this document. As you know, things are moving very swiftly. Things are always changing. So I recommend that for information, people always go back to the source websites for the government or agencies to see what the latest guidelines are and what the status is. So, so EIDL was, more money was directed to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Funding. And the way it worked was that initially governors had to request from SBA that they receive assistance. So it was really interesting in the early days, even though more money had been allocated to EIDL, some organizations I was talking to, they weren't able to apply for that funding right away because their state had not been designated as eligible to receive that assistance. So there was a bit of a delay there. Now all 50 states are eligible. And so I had to reach out to organizations and say, you need to put some pressure on your governor's office. You need to call your governor so that it can be activated for your state. So these loans offer up to $2 million in assistance to support small businesses in their temporary loss of revenue. Can be used to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits. And these are 30-year loans. So terms are determined on a case-by-case basis, depending on a borrower's ability to repay. So we didn't see too many of our nonprofits or businesses take advantage of the EIDL loans right away. It's it's difficult. The very first thing we heard from businesses was, the last thing we need is more debt, is another loan. How am I going to pay that back? But one thing to consider about the EIDL loans is that there is a loan advance. Um, um, Applicants and recipients are eligible for a loan advance of up to $10,000. So, and this loan advance does not have to be repaid. EIDL loans are funded within 3 days of a successful application. So on the one hand, there's this opportunity, this option that you're taking on more debt, but there is this $10,000 loan advance that can really help act as a bridge in the intermediate term. All right, I just want to touch on the intent of the CARE Act. So the intent of the CARE Act, these were the words from the Senate, that loans would be prioritized for small business concerns and entities in underserved and rural markets. Small business concerns owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, women, and business in a set-aside. Did we see that? Not really. We can go forward now to the Paycheck Protection Program. The CARES Act made about $350 billion available through the SBA's 7A loan structure for eligible lenders to make loan to businesses for payroll and limited operations costs. So up to $2 million in assistance was available per company. And it was supposed to be, to help overcome the temporary loss of revenue. But as we've seen, very few organizations, very few businesses, at least in our communities, have been able to break through. So a bit more on the Paycheck Protection Program. There was a size limit, and it was supposed to be also applicable to sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed persons. What we saw in effect was that many of the larger banks were able, to change the rules a little bit. Certain banks were only accepting loans if you had a credit card with them, and these are not banks that serve low to moderate income communities for the most part. CDFIs, MDIs, they're the ones who really serve small businesses that I'm familiar with. And it's been a very frustrating experience. I know a number of small business owners in San Antonio who have loans pending for the Paycheck Protection Program. And what we've seen, groups like Ruth Chris Steakhouse, I believe the Lakers, getting priority. If we look at it by sector, it's really just extraordinary. I mean, just in general, Latino business owners have limited access to capital through regulated banks. So if you look here, this great graphic was put together by Urban Institute, and I'm sorry, I just barely got it onto the page. But what we're looking at here in blue is by the NICS sectors, the percentage of total March job losses. And in yellow, you can see by NICS code, the percentage of companies that received first round PPP dollars. So you can see a total imbalance, right? Look at the services sector, total imbalance there. But you can see that sectors like professional, scientific, and technical assistance services, they've, obtained loans where they're actually seeing, job gains. Manufacturing has also received, outsized assistance. And it's just really important to keep in mind, half of small businesses have less than 15 days of cash liquidity as a buffer. Um, and that's, you know, the disparities are particularly evident in majority Black and Hispanic communities where small businesses have very limited cash holdings. So we would really like to see another P added to the PPP for parity. And so, yes, we've been pushing for that. Um, um, this slide we can skip over. It's just sort of going through a timeline here. We've been advocating to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, to the Congressional Black Caucus, to Speaker Pelosi, the chairwoman of the Small Business Committee, Maxine Waters, Manuel Cleaver. We've been asking that they fix the PPP to establish a set aside for CDFIs, and including at least $100 million to support culturally and linguistically relevant entrepreneurial assistance for small business owners. Also, to really establish a credit facility to these nonprofit CDFIs and minority depository institutions. The way that PPP works is that the SBA isn't giving the money directly to these banks or directly to these 7(a) lenders or CDFIs. Those institutions have to front the money. And so NALCAB has been able to help certain groups within our network to pre-fund that money at very low cost so that they can then turn around and make those loans and wait for the SBA to reimburse them. But it's been really difficult. A majority of Latino businesses were locked out, and big banks and their businesses have really benefited. And I have to say, the pressure that we've been putting on Congress, on the SBA and Treasury, we're starting to see some movement there. They are hearing us. Just late yesterday, we learned that SBA is opening up a specific window of time to only accept loans from lending institutions with asset sizes less than $1 billion. Now, we really welcome that. We'd like to see more, and so we're going to continue to advocate for some more progress on this. Again, really like to use the food bank as a model. It's orderly, it's well-planned, intentional distribution of aid to those most at risk, and really they think they can be a model for us all. So as we look across the country and across our network, what am I seeing? I'm seeing that our members are encouraging the small businesses that they work with to continue to communicate with banks and mortgage companies, their property owners, their landlords, utility companies. Some of our communities are not comfortable with calling these folks and reaching out and saying, hey, I lost my job. I'm having some financial trouble. But so we've been encouraging small businesses and individuals to reach out as soon as possible and communicate. We've seen a lot of our nonprofits making emergency grants, cash grants, low-cost loans, deferrals of loan payments, loan forgiveness. We've seen a lot of our nonprofits establish websites and really become a hub for sharing resources on business, finance, health, mental health, providing emergency food assistance. Conexión Americas in Nashville, Tennessee has been putting together food boxes and coordinating with the local food bank. They're soon going to begin including household items and even diapers. A lot of groups have been doing translations of orders from the local health department, of information from the SBA to try to just maximize the amount of information and the accessibility of that information to our communities. A lot of our network are just doing very different things to help small businesses pivot and be ready to re-enter the market when possible. And so, perhaps, cleaning businesses, landscaping businesses, they don't necessarily have a whole lot of contact with their clients other than maybe sending an invoice. And what we're seeing is that our members are encouraging these folks and teaching them to reach out in different ways, build up their Facebook presence, talk to their clients, and say, we're not working now, but these are the steps that we're taking to be able to open, and we're ready, and we're here for you in this new market. We've seen groups really try to help, the food entrepreneurs do takeout. Food entrepreneurs go online and do a lot of, creative solutions, such as gift baskets for Mother's Day and other shipping and delivery of their services. So they've been very creative, and I think communication has been really key. Speaking of communication, it can feel very disempowering, and what is so important is that we capture and convey the narrative of these small businesses to our funders and to elected officials, so that we are not just a footnote in this crisis, and that we are not left out. Because by continuing to keep up the pressure, we will get more assistance to our communities, and we will persevere. Part of that is also partnering and collaborating. So we're really happy to collaborate with Mile High Connects here today. NALCAB is also collaborating with a number of other groups, the Opportunity Finance Network, Cameo in California, really anyone who shares our mission and serves our communities and is pushing for more equity. I'm going to share some resources here, and I believe these slides will be delivered to the attendees and registrants after this webinar. NALCAB has a web page with COVID-19 resources that we update frequently, some policy resources, and there's also a link to our newsletter. Cameo has been absolutely prolific in the webinars and information that they are sharing. Cameo is the California Association for Microenterprise Opportunity. Also, a really interesting group is Small Business Majority. They are a collaborative of institutions supporting small businesses. They have, they're doing a number of webinars in Spanish and in English after hours, particularly targeted to small businesses. And so it's been a really great resource, particularly for those in the undocumented community and those with mixed immigration status households. There are so few resources out there. And Small Business Majority has been very good about sharing those. Council on Development Finance Agencies has an interesting resource center. There you can click on their map and see what resources are available by state. Again, there's a link to the SBA's disaster assistance site, which is constantly being updated. And so, if you visit it 1 week, before advising anyone on anything, I suggest you click there again. USDA also has some resources. for rural communities, LISC has a really great newsletter that they send out with lots of grant opportunities, funding opportunities, webinars, and it's mostly applicable to rural communities, but some to the urban and suburban communities. So I like to look through that and can occasionally find things to share. They also have a very good crisis management webinar series. Also, the Federal Reserve Bank put out a brief on COVID, and they also have a small business credit survey for 2019 that was recently released. I encourage you, if you are working with small businesses, I encourage your organization to participate in the Small Business Credit Survey. Really, all it is you're helping to distribute the credit survey, but it really helps our communities to have a voice and show the need that's there. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. Juntos somos más, together we are stronger. Please stay in touch. And finally, also all registrants will also receive our sort of policy handbook, and that can really help your organization do things like craft a letter to Congress or to your local representatives. They're very good templates and basic steps to advocate more efficiently for your community. So we're happy to share that with you. That'll be sent in a follow-up email. I'm happy to answer any questions now or at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Storm. And thank you, Storm, for being with us and laying kind of the national context of what's happening and what you're seeing across your member organization. Please, if you have questions, pop them into the chat box. Storm will be sticking around with us, so please feel free to pop in there and you can answer them as you receive them. We'll also take questions at the end of the conversation, so please keep them coming. I'm now going to turn it to Maribel to highlight what's happening at the local level. So Storm did an amazing job of kind of providing the national context, what she's seeing across multiple different organizations, what NALCAB is doing to help support local small business TA providers and lifting up what's happening. Maribel has been doing some amazing work, as I mentioned, with Inclusive Action for the City based out in Los Angeles. For those of you that are not aware, Mile High Connects has been part of the Spark Initiative, which is the national initiative of 6 different sites, of which one of our sister cities is LA. So I'm now going to turn it over to Maribel to talk a little bit about the work that they are doing with their Street Vendor Fund, some collaboration that they're doing, speaking to Storm's point about collaboration and partnership in this time, and some of the challenges that they're seeing within their entrepreneurs. So Maribel?
Yes, thank you, Dea. Good morning, everyone. Well, morning out here. So we're a small nonprofit out in Los Angeles, and we have we do a lot of policy and research, and we pair it with economic development work. Our two front-facing programs that deal directly with clients are one, which is the first program is CORE. So we really work with storefront businesses. We own the properties, and eventually as they pay rent, the renters become owners. So it's a long-term plan to make sure that they have ownership stake and are paying into equity rather than paying another person for rent. Our other program is a microloan. So we have a small microloan program that's up to $30,000. At entry, all of our clients are low income. So I think in both programs, we really saw almost immediately that we were going to have a large impact, negative impacts from COVID-19. Very early on, I think prior to the Safer at Home orders hitting, what we did was for our CORE program, we sent out letters letting folks know that there was flexibility in rent. So should they have issues to contact us. And then with our loan program, we just did a blanket 3-month loan deferral. We said across the board, even if folks wanted to come in, we weren't going to take payments. So we did have individuals that came in March, and we just said, keep your money. We'll figure out a way to modify your loan in the future. We're a smaller organization, so we were able to do that. And we took that time as we paused our programming to really shift the way we operated. So we increased our technical assistance. And that really ranged from helping people shift to operating virtually or to offering services online. For corner stores or other essential businesses, we helped them create a plan where they could operate given new regulations with COVID-19. And then creating links to resources. So we became that. We wanted to see ourselves as a tool for them. So, for example, if people had EDD, had the ability to claim unemployment, we would help them through that process. Most recently, folks that have had issues registering their stimulus payments, helping to input their bank accounts. So it became more of us stepping back away from just the business and really looking at the individual needs of the person to help them get by. In our loan portfolio, about 50% of our borrowers are street vendors. So we very quickly saw that there was going to be a need for cash assistance. So a lot of efforts in the first few weeks of March went towards creating an emergency fund, which was cash assistance. It was $400 that we would just distribute and they could use to either pay their rent or purchase food. To date, today we have a large deployment. So we're doing about 100 to 150 cards a week. And today, I believe we're doing about 150. So by the end of the day, we should have about 450 cards that were distributed. I would like to reiterate the importance of collaboration. We're a very small team. We're a team of 7 to 8 individuals, and we really worked with other organizations to enhance our work. So the type of cards I saw the question from Monica, they are wire cards. So it's essentially a MasterCard. There is no cost in itself for the card, but we do have to load them with cash. And I think there's a small amount that we have to pay to load the money. Once we were able to deploy the cards, during the first one, what we were able to do is pair with other organizations. So for example, some family source centers had grocery cards that they had difficulty issuing. So what we did is we said we're already having this mass distribution of funds, and there's going to be a lot of people that are flowing through our office. We already have the system in place. We will become that vehicle. So we issued, in addition to that, $300 cards per individual. Another organization, Public Counsel, which is a partner, said we have diapers and baby supplies. So we were already doing the work. We surveyed people that were coming in, asked the ages of the children that were coming, and then once we had that survey, we just created bags that included food, information, because there was a lot of fear of eviction. So another legal organization was offering help with rent or help with eviction support. So we included their information as well. If anyone had issues with getting to our office, because I think most of our clients are low income, and the advocacy work that was done to reach out, that outreach work was really towards low income folks. We didn't want them using public transportation, so we reached out to Lyft, and they gave us codes and made sure that they were able to come to our office at no cost. So essentially we tried to make it from the deployment of the fund to even like the way they were receiving them as easy as possible for the individual. So far we've had a good response. We've had about 1,200 people apply, and people are still donating. So it's felt like it's coming from foundation. It's also coming from private donors through our GoFundMe page. At a higher level, I think I just want to say we weren't able to do this without working with other organizations. So we're a small team. We weren't able to do it alone, and that also has as we're hearing stories and talking to individuals, we're really able to see the need. So based on a lot of the comments of individuals is how we've changed access to resources. So this past week, as we were making calls, we kept hearing like, I don't have enough to buy food. LAUSD, which is our school district for Los Angeles, was offering, for example, packaged food for students. But we kept hearing that's not enough. We need to prepare our own food. It's not enough to just pick up a small bag of prepared, like a hot dog or a burrito. We need to prepare food. We need full bags. So in this following week, we've been focusing on working with food banks to maybe be able to funnel that access to that food to some of the individuals we've been working with, or give them the information so they would be able to go on their own. I think with the communities we work with, there's also a digital divide. So oftentimes they may not be aware that the resource is there. So we, in all ways possible, we're trying to make it as easy as we can, without really having to, as easy as we can without really adding too much work as well. Most recently, we also partnered with Family Independence Initiative because we were already doing the distribution. I think because we were doing a lot of the work, a lot of people came to us and said, you're already doing it, how can you help us make it easier? So they had $500 cash assistance that they wanted to make available. It's going directly into folks' bank account. We already had a list, so now we're reaching out to them and we're helping them register their bank accounts. So in addition to the grocery cards, our cash assistance, most of them will also be receiving a $500 cash assistance from Family Independence Initiative directly into their bank accounts. So that's in bulk what's happened. It's been, we've been fairly busy, but I think it's all good work. One last partner, which was unusual but fantastic, we also saw, based on commentary, people were really afraid for their mental health. There was a lot of stress. The Los Angeles Public Library reached out and said, hey, like, people don't have access to internet in their homes. They need a distraction. Our library has access to free books, free movies, audio books. If you give us the names, which we already had, and a phone number, we'll create a library card for everyone. You'll text it out and they can download the app and use it. And that's actually been fantastic. People that couldn't afford Netflix, something so simple that we all take for granted. People have been using their program to watch movies. So I think it's the beauty of, Storm really mentioned it, like really making public your work, and really making sure you're telling the stories, because as we were sharing that people were stressed and people couldn't afford the distraction, the Los Angeles Public Library reached out. So in working with other organizations and really seeing what the gaps are, I think we can really help each other through this crisis. Okay, so let me see if there's a few questions. Nope, I don't think so. But if you all have any questions for me, I'd love to take some of those. But I think really the only thing that I would like to continue to stress is how we weren't able to do it alone, and how it's been a number of organizations that have really wanted to assist low-income business owners through this crisis, and are on a daily basis reaching out, trying to figure out how to help. And really, we're all doing it together.
Great. Thank you, Maribel, for the overview on the work that you're doing. I personally have a question, and then we'll open it up for folks. Again, feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, and we'll take questions at that time. But I'm just curious, are folks eligible for more than one card? You mentioned an application process that you will give them a card. What does that process look like? Is it like a one-time offer, or is it multiple times?
It is a one-time offer per household, but that won't restrict the individual from getting assistance elsewhere. So that person may get that one cash card from Inclusive Action, but they may still be able to get that $500 from Family Independence Initiative and any additional grocery cards that are available. We're also pairing it with technical assistance. So if they are eligible for example, unemployment or any other federal benefits, or interested in a loan, if we're able to do it in-house, we'll help them. Otherwise, we'll refer them to other organizations to help them really either package a loan or apply to one if they need to.
Hi, so following up on my question about the type of bank card, so it's a MasterCard and there's a small fee to get it going, but then to Daya's point, you don't reload it so then it's just, you sink that cost of the fee. Mm-hmm. Did you look at Venmo or PayPal? If you don't mind going into
Yeah. We did. It actually, it was one of the least, I didn't do it myself. So one of my colleagues did all of the research, and this was actually the least expensive option that she found after her research. We're also in conversations with another organization who's trying to, and another, the County of Los Angeles also wants to do something similar, and they may actually implement Wirecard as well, because there is no cost for the card. It's only the cost to load, as opposed to, I think, everywhere else that we really looked, there was a cost not only for loading and reloading, but also a cost just to physically have a card. And then I think one of the other reasons we did the MasterCard, I'll tack onto that, as opposed to Venmo, because we did play with the ideas. A lot of the individuals we worked with did not have bank accounts. So this created an ability for them to have access to money without having to go to a bank and open one. Or in some scenarios, I know individuals tried for the additional funding that was the direct deposit, and they didn't have the correct documentation. So they either didn't have a second proof of identity, or there was something missing. So that just gave us the ability to service everyone, although it did require a pickup.
Thanks. And I think, Maribel, just a question on the pickup. You know, I think what I've heard from some folks is some concern around you know, stay-at-home orders, which I know right now, at least in Colorado, we're moving towards safer at home, right? Which means we could still go out, but use caution, basically. So I'm just curious, what does that process look like for you all as you think about that face-to-face interaction in picking up the cards?
Yes. My colleague Julie is a former nurse, and I think she took every precaution possible in laying it out. It did take us a few weeks to figure it out, and we will be shifting locations. But we did it as a setup where no one was inside of the office. So we did it in like a parking lot for more than 10 minutes. So we created like a flow where someone would come in, there was a line, there was over 6 feet distance between individuals. We had masks ready at entry if people didn't have it. There was only one document they had to sign. Everyone was instructed to bring their own pen. There was virtually almost no contact. There's also separation between the person issuing the card and the individual picking up. So it would take no more than a minute or two for each individual as they left. And there was a gap where, if, just in case, every 15 minutes we would do a cleanup of the area. So that would be disinfecting tables or that were there. There were no chairs, so it was fairly effective. I think but we do have to be we were mindful and have to continue to be mindful of the safety of individuals. So reminding people to bring a mask, reminding people to bring their own pens, reminding people to keep space between each other. The reason we are shifting locations is because people became aware we were issuing cards there, and we didn't want folks to start creating a line if they knew we were giving out cash. So we are going to move and start distributing money in different areas, just to make sure that we don't ever have lines outside our facility.
Great. And then one other question, and of course, waiting for others to jump in as well. How are you partnering, or are you partnering with the city? And did the city happen to contribute any dollars to the fund itself?
Indirectly. So yes, the city did give funding, but it gave it through Family Source Centers, which were the grocery cards. So a lot, I think there was, and they also provided masks for folks. So we did have masks and gloves that became available. Mm-hmm. There are ongoing conversations. I think the city and the county are a little bit slower to move. And that's because the need is so high. I think we're able to move quickly because we're a small office, and we probably don't get, well, maybe now that it's been published in media, I think we're getting more folks applying, but I think a lot of people are directly going to the city and the county. The city did create the Angelino card, and I think the county did create a grant, and almost immediately, like within a few minutes, both of their websites crashed. So I do think that they are looking for ways to help other organizations in assisting and deploying those funds. In a similar way, I think I heard yesterday that the state of California will be using organizations to distribute some of the cash assistance for undocumented folks.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Maribel? There's also some time afterwards for additional questions if folks have any, but please feel free to jump in, unmute yourself, or feel free to type it into the chat box if folks have any questions. Looks like there was a question in the chat box by Patrick. What was the vendor that charged only for the card, for loading the card? Others have looked at, or others we have looked at had significant upfront fees, excuse me. And also, what funders have supported your cash assistance programs? Philanthropic, not government.
So the vendor is called Wirecard. I can actually, in a follow-up email, send that information for anyone that's interested, or to everyone. And we did have some philanthropic support. We also had support from some council members as well, so from local government, and a lot of private donations. So we did receive a lot of support from our GoFundMe page. And in the same way, just publishing the stories, making sure that people know that it's going directly to folks, and people have been donating, thankfully. Wirecard, so it's, and I'll put that in there. And I'll send out the information. I think it's a very good option for anyone that's interested in doing any cash assistance. We found it very quick. And then, for example, we've been purchasing in bulk, so we'll purchase 500 cards at a time. There is no cost for those 500 cards unless we load them. So it makes it easier for us to have, in case, well, as extra money has been coming in, to load the cards, so there's not a lag in deployment.
Great. All right. Well, please feel free to continue inserting your questions. Oh, it looks like another question popped up. Local philanthropies, national philanthropies. Just kind of curious, at what level is philanthropy participating?
I believe so. Directly for this fund, I know we have we've had national and local. Mm-hmm.
And I think I remember from your conversation, or from our conversation, that maybe the local United Way was also participating. Is that?
Yes. So United Way. We also have the Roy and Patricia Disney Foundation. I think, who am I missing? So I think other individuals have reached out rather than directly towards the fund. They've, aside from the cash assistance, which is why I'm pausing to separate, we've also received additional support for our administrative work, which isn't directly going into this fund, but I think with good work comes like people really trying to help. And then we've had a lot of individuals directly, which has been touching to me. So like we've had like people send gift cards and say, with more than $500, and say, I want these to go to disabled individuals. I want these to go to single mothers. So I think we've received a good amount of support. So I'd say local and national communities, and private, with the Roy Disney Foundation is a private foundation. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Maribel. Thank you for participating. I know you'll be on the call, sticking around with us, so please feel free to pop your questions into the chat box as those come up. And I also recognize today was really intended to plant the seeds, right? We're wanting to cover these items at a really high level and wanting to figure out if there's some energy to dive deeper. What does that look like, and who's interested in diving into that conversation alongside us? So thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over now to Makisha Booth. She is with SistaBiz. I think several of you in the Denver metro area are familiar with her, but I wanted to give this opportunity to shout out the amazing work that she's doing in shifting her own programming to really be able to support our Black women-owned businesses in this time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Makisha.
Thanks, Daya. I am going to start by popping a couple of things into the chat box in terms of reports and resources, so that I don't have to drown you all in statistics. You can find much of what I'm going to talk about here. So I'm Makisha Booth. I'm the founder and head business coach at Sister Biz Global Network. We're a business accelerator, a nonprofit. And our goal is to help Black women build sellable, scalable, profitable businesses. Like my friend who said, the Latino community is the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country. The Black women have held that title for many years as well in recent years. And so we are here to make sure that they not only have that sort of title, but they have similar success in outcomes in their business, which is not happening right now. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we offer and services that we offer, and then share a little bit around some of the things we've heard around impacts from COVID, and then share some of the programs that and activities that we've been engaged in to support our community of Black women entrepreneurs through this time. To give you some context in terms of who we serve region-wise, we're based in Colorado. Over 60% of our participants are in Colorado, and we're now expanding more largely across the nation, especially now that we have more folks virtually engaged. So I will go to the next slide. So I thought I'd keep it pretty simple. We have sort of 4 kind of strands of work. Our academy is where we think about entrepreneurial development and skill building and training. And so we host 4-week boot camps. We have a 9-month business makeover cohort designed to help women build growth models. And we do one-to-one coaching in the cohorts, and then outside of the cohorts, we offer a free coaching call that's on our site. So we've offered about 151 of those last year. And then all of our cohorts and coaching clients receive monthly coaching. We have a business clinic. The business clinic focuses on providing done-for-you services and technical assistance, back office support to accompany the learning and coaching. Our access to capital programming right now looks like our loan fund, which just launched in December of 2019, and our crowdfunding campaign. Our loan fund is a partnership with SEDS and Alex Wise over at SEDS and her team. And then our crowdfunding campaign is a pretty simple online way to contribute to the women who complete our cohort programs. And you can find that on our website as well. The loan fund, we offer loans up to $50K, more likely to see our loans be in the $20 to $25K range. And our community piece is really important to us. It's a membership network, but there's also just a lot of community building happening outside of the membership in our Facebook group of over 2K women. And there we provide live stream educational live streams, as well as a lot of connection and collaboration between women. We've put together various collaborative structures so that Black women entrepreneurs can work together, like masterminds, leads groups, book clubs, those sorts of things, and provide the protocols and facilitators for women to engage in that work. And so that's a little bit about sort of our main kind of 4 strands of work. To give you some context before I head to the next slide, much like the other presenters mentioned, there is a prevalent wealth gap in the Black community, a prevalent credit gap, and then there's even talk around a trust gap where the history of predatory lending and discrimination in lending have impacted our community's ability to access capital. That has only heightened since COVID-19 started. They say when America catches a cold, Black people catch the flu or catch a pneumonia. And that just means it was already bad for us, but when it got bad for y'all, it got really bad for us. And so, we're dealing with that right now. Our women typically have fewer resources already. We have lower access to networks that have access to capital. We're less likely to have a cushion in terms of monetary financial cushion if things go downhill in the business, and more likely to depend on immediate cash flow for survival of the business and the household. So we're seeing that and this is before COVID. Slow to borrow, not sure if opportunities with banks and lending are trustworthy, a fear of debt, as my colleague mentioned. Lower levels of eligibility in terms of credit and collateral, lower levels of readiness. Because of the lack of resources, they're not likely to have a back office, not likely to have access to an accountant, paperwork not in order, fewer banking relationships. And so when PPP was released, that just meant we were slower to respond and less likely to be eligible and ready. And so as a result, a lot of our folks struggled to even apply and access funds. So those are some of the issues. If you could move to the next slide, but before I head into that slide, I also just want to acknowledge that African Americans are suffering from and dying from COVID-19 at a higher rate. So that, and our family members and relatives and those we care for are more likely to be at risk, and that limits us even more in terms of our ability to reach out and do work in person or be on the front lines in essential work. And that impacts businesses as well. So what we've heard more around from our small businesses, I included a small Facebook clip of something in our Facebook group where I asked folks to kind of share where they're at with applications for government funding. And the highest number of folks, even though this is a very small sample, the highest, but I did hear this across the entire network, the highest number of folks said, I want to apply, but I'm just not sure. And then the next levels where I applied and I was not approved. And so some of the complaints we've heard from our business owners are lost revenue, confusion about applications and eligibility, inability to meet the eligibility requirements, not having paperwork required for some of the opportunities to access capital. And then on another level, just not really sure how to, not being sure how to handle client communications and manage clients during this time, and needing support with re-entry planning as we do this slower, or the stay-at-home mandate that's gonna, gradually release us. And so those are some of the things we've heard and then a little bit more context as well around our population. We're more likely to be solopreneurs. Over 95% of Black entrepreneurs are solopreneurs. We're more likely to be in professional services or retail in terms of industries. And so, and a lot of our brick and mortar folks are restaurants and salons. And so in terms of percentages there, you're gonna see higher numbers there. The next slide is some of the things we're doing to respond to COVID in our 4 strands. And so in the Academy, we've had accountants come in and do cash flow kind of strategy sessions. We have our 9-month cohort taking a look at, and have been since early March, reworking their revenue streams to take advantage of some of the things that are needed during this time within their scope of work as close as they could get. I know a lot of people have seen folks selling masks and just thinking differently about how they can service clients and what services and products they can offer during this time in order to stay afloat. So we've helped them think through their business models and revenue streams, offered cash flow support and strategies. In terms of the clinic, we have not provided one-on-one application support. We have provided lots of tips and tools for application support and forwarded our folks to organizations that are doing that work and that are have more of a low barrier to entry experience around helping them access PPP funds and other funds. We are providing our grantees from our emergency fund with support. And so each of the grantees from our emergency fund is getting direct access and one-on-one time with a cash flow strategist / accountant and business coaching sessions. In terms of capital, there is a typo. Our emergency fund is not a loan fund, it's a grant fund, so I apologize for that typo. But we're giving away $2,500 grant funds to Black women entrepreneurs who apply, along with the tech assistance that I had mentioned. And we had over 200 applications come in almost immediately after we opened up applications. And we did only raise funding for about 15 grants. And so we're still raising funds to try to support the women who are looking for help. And in terms of our community strand, some of the things we've been doing are our Salon Mastermind, which is a re-entry mastermind for salon owners to think through sanitation. A lot of our folks are looking at like physical location, reopening, and what that looks like in terms of sanitation. How will I access supplies? How will I adjust scheduling and staffing? What will that look like for me revenue-wise? Insurance, legal implications, all sorts of things that, and then just the reality of the matter is above all of that, like my health as a salon owner, will I live? Will I endanger my family? It's a real fear. And so the Salon Mastermind is a space for them to think about how to make tough decisions and what are the key decision points that they need to be aware of. We also provide, we're drafting together with Sister Biz leading with our copywriters, draft SOPs for them, checklists, client communication packets, those sorts of things. We're going to have an attorney come on and talk with them about things to think about in terms of waivers that they were wanting clients to sign, and insurance policy agents calling in to talk to them about what they should be thinking about in that regard. Having tough conversations like, what if you open your doors and I know these are tough conversations that everyone is having. What if you open your doors and one of your clients is fine when they come in, but then they reach out and say they have COVID the next day? What kind of client what's your emergency action plan if someone gets hurt or dies or gets sick, or if you lose staff members? And so the mastermind is a place for that discussion, guided by guest speakers and experts when we can provide them. And then our self-care sessions were really around emotional and mental health during this time. Support with homeschooling, and managing decisions around daycare and that sort of thing. So those are some of the things we've been doing to support our community. As I said, I put 2 reports in there. There are some basic reports that were out well before COVID, and I think that's all I have for today. I'll take questions if you have any, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Makisha. That was it's a really great conversation. I have a question before we turn it over to the group. I think, and this is something that I'd love to ask everyone, but a lot of the programs that have been released recently have focused on bricks and mortars and typically do not respond to the needs of those solopreneurs. So I'm just curious if Sister Biz is doing any sort of advocacy work to highlight, especially within the Black women-owned entrepreneur community, that a lot of these are solopreneurs and may not qualify, for example, for city programs because of the way that the policies are written or the programs are written. So I'm just kind of curious if you all are working on any advocacy there.
Yeah, so kind of to be clear, I don't have an advocacy staff. So my advocacy is me usually being pissed off and getting on the phone and calling a legislator.
Yep.
And I have done that, yes. And I've been on the phone with folks from the governor's office and on the phone with the Black Caucus, and they've moved forward with advocacy work as a result, and a Black agenda around this work as well. Representative Leslie Harriet, Representative James Coleman, those folks are looking at some of the things and information I sent them, everything from the business side and the advocacy for our folks, and just explaining to them the reality of like our inability to access these funds and how our businesses are different, because we talk about small business, but small business and solopreneurship and micro business are different. And sometimes solopreneurs and micro businesses drown in the advocacy for small business, and you don't really point out the difference in need and challenges. And so, I absolutely feel like I'm doing that advocacy work, but not from a structured programming standpoint, just from when it's needed, I try to get out there.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions? Again, feel free to use the chat box, unmute yourself, or use the reactions to ask a question.
my application process for the Unstoppable grant. So our stimulus package is called Unstoppable, and it's the combination of the grant and the technical services that accompany it. Our application process is like 5 minutes, and upload your registration and share information with us, your financials if you have them. They're not required. And share the impact of COVID. I can also put the link in there. I'll do that after I'm done as well to it, so you can see it's pretty simple. Like, there's no reason not to apply. Like, you just don't want money if you don't apply. So it's pretty simple application. We do have more of an in-depth on the back end of the application process. We have a review team that meets every Friday. We have a scorecard. We're really trying to prioritize brick and mortars who really need money to bridge dollars between now and the time they might get other funding to pay leasing and rent. We're prioritizing people who, due to COVID, maybe have to transition from in-person services or are impacted by like events or travel businesses. We're prioritizing folks who have to transition their business online and need support with the IT or the online transition. And so we have a set of priorities in terms of the types of businesses that we're prioritizing funding for. We're also, really trying to prevent closure is the biggest thing for this fund. Like, if you are demonstrating in the information that you've sent to us that your business is not going to make it after post-COVID if you don't get some help now, and that you're struggling to find funds elsewhere, then you're pretty much under consideration.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Makisha or any of the panelists that we've had today? This is our time to open up for more of a conversation.
Hi there, it's Storm. I just shared to everyone the link to NALCAB's Guide to Equitable Neighborhood Development. So as we all try to make the case to funders and policy makers about the needs of our community, a lot of groups have found this guide to be really helpful to show, to use free mapping and data resources to show how neighborhood change is affecting our communities. And so there are resources where you can map out the neighborhood change, show the disinvestment, show the locations of banks and credit unions, and just really help to better make your case for funding. So that's what that big post is in the chat.
Thank you, Storm. Makisha, there's a question in the chat box for you. What is the turnaround time for the grant?
So the turnaround time for the grant was 1 week. We've frozen the applications. We have over 200 applications. We've already distributed all the funding, and now we're trying to seek other funding, but we're keeping the same applications because there were so many, and we've already screened them and ranked them so that when funding comes in, we can just distribute grants. So we don't have any more new grants coming in, but we really tried to make sure that when the applications came in and the funding landed in the bank, that we got all those dollars out within days of receiving them.
Great, thank you. And Maribel, I have a similar question for you. This might just be my memory, but I'm curious, what's the turnaround time for you all in distributing the cards? Because I know you all have an application process as well. How long does that typically take?
The turnaround time tends to be about 2 weeks. And I think it's due to the amount of applications we have and the amount of people that we've decided we can have in the office or pick up in 1 day. So it's about 2 weeks. Not for the cash card, but for the direct deposit, that's taking about 2 days. So that's a little bit faster.
Great, thank you. Any other questions that folks might have for the panelists? Patrick, you've got a question.
Yeah, I do this Patrick Horvath from the Denver Foundation. turn my video on as well. Just want to take this opportunity with all these incredibly smart expert people on the phone to do a little due diligence on an idea that I just heard about today. There was a concern that the second round of SBA funding, the PPP dollars in particular, as I think you indicated, Storm, we're just not going out in an appropriate fashion. There was an effort here locally by a local bank, community-minded bank, although a fairly large bank, First Bank, to create a sort of intermediate loan product that they would give out to CDFIs, 3 particular CDFIs that had capacity but were bottlenecked in the PPP process and could not get their applicants through the door so that they could begin lending before those dollars started to flow. And then they were looking for guarantees from, First Bank was, from the local foundation community for the dollars that they were putting into the CDFIs. Have you heard about anything like that through NALCAB, or about sort of ways to buttress the PPP program while the SBA process is getting kind of unwound? It seems like there's some risk involved there, because I don't know if these dollars are actually flowing, and now I understand the second round has kind of collapsed. Just not, and I'm not sure if they were aiming at the first round or the second round. So I'm just a little confused about what local efforts might be going on to try to provide gap support that would ultimately rely on the SBA dollars, but that would help sort of grease the skids while things are bottled up here.
Patrick, this is Allison at Feds. I can answer a little bit of that. You have to be a little bit careful in how we do kind of stopgap funding. One of the requirements for those PPP and EIDL loans from the SBA is the no funding elsewhere test. So if you give funding, we've effectively failed that test. The SBA's pretty much flat out told us, if you do it, you have to, in the written loan documentation, say this is temporary funding until the PPP or EIDL loan comes through. But then you also have to underwrite it as if that PPP or EIDL funding doesn't come through at all. So it's a little bit tricky, but you can, the local CDFIs can kind of go that route to try to get through that kind of stopgap funding portion, but you just have to be very, very careful with the way the actual loan documents are worded. And part of the difficulty there is, at least most of our CDFIs have gone through attorneys to develop those loan documents. So altering them, we have to go through the attorneys to do it again. So there's a little bit, we're thinking on our feet, we're trying to get it done, but there is a little bit of kind of little shoving a square peg into a round hole.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks, Allison. I'm just curious, Storm, I mean, I know NALCAB has been doing a lot at the national level and is also, at least has a CDFI arm. I'm just curious if there's anything, and this could also be an offline conversation, but anything that you all might be working on that piece.
Yes, so some of the CDFIs that participate in our Accesso Fund, we've been able to distribute funds to them, including Latino Economic Development Center, to help, sort of bridge the gap here in terms of PPP funding. In terms of the exact wording of the grants and the loans, I don't want to misspeak here, but I can definitely check in with our CFO and see, if we can help share the wording of those documents. I mean, obviously, things differ state by state, but I'm happy to share what we do have. I'd also add the Opportunity Finance Network. They have some listservs where people share a lot of best practices, but also loan documents and other resources around this. And so, so I do see similar questions like this on there. So I'll go online and check. But if you aren't a member of the OFN listserv, I suggest that that you do, because it's a lot of great free information, so that folks don't have to reinvent the wheel. But I can follow up with you separately and get your email from Deo, or you can send it to me in the chat.
That'd be great. Thank you, Storm.
Thank you so much.
So in the last 2 minutes, I want to just thank everyone for hopping on this call. Like I said, the intent of today was to at least plant the seeds, see where there might be energy. When we came across both of the models, what Makisha shared as far as the Unstoppable, and then the work that Inclusive Action is taking, we were really excited and know that there's been a number of other things happening here locally. So we wanted to highlight that. So thank you, Storm, for your work and joining us today, and any resources that you have for us to take advantage of here locally. Maribel, for sharing your program and the work that you're doing. I'm sure there's going to be several more questions after this call that we'll get over to you. And then Makisha, for sharing not only what you're doing here locally to support our Black women-owned businesses, but really what you're doing nationally, because I know this has been a very difficult time for all really small micro entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. So I just want to thank everyone for their call or for joining us today. I put up a poll just to get a sense of how folks are feeling. Please take a moment to, if you wouldn't mind just answering that. We will follow up with you all afterwards to send out the presentation as well as additional resources and links. If you are not part of our Mobilize group and would like to be a part of that, please email me and let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone.